Well, bugger me sideways. I never thought I'd say this, but The Mandalorian did the unthinkable and failed to win me over as it draws the curtains on its third season. I have admittedly been critical of some of what the season has had to offer, but I stuck with it and remained optimistic that this would come together by the end and provide audiences with a satisfying conclusion to what has become a treasured piece of content to come from a galaxy far, far away. Sadly though, I am left questioning some of what we got, but generally had a good time with it as well.
And don't you dare intercut this with footage of me freaking out!
So long as I didn't think too hard on it, but if you've been here for a while, you know that's not what I do. Now knowing everything that we have with this season, I don't think this is what this season should have been.
Well, no shit.
And I've certainly got some thoughts over the various bits of information we received closing this chapter of The Mandalorian and moving into Season 4, but the levels of plot convenience and hap-handed explanations in this felt extremely rushed for me. And I won't be entirely negative towards this, as I do feel it possesses some merits, but damn was it tough to look past some of these faults. We begin with Bo and the crew retreating into the caves while Din tackles two hopeless soldiers with a little assist from Grogu, who conveniently finds him and gets him out of harm's way.
Oh, how convenient!
Gideon then sends his interceptors and bombers to wipe out the Mandos in the sky as Axe later returns and evacuates the Imperial cruiser and plunges it into the caverns below to wipe out the base.
Good job.
Meanwhile, Din and Grogu sneak through the base and locate Gideon's location with the help of R5, who just finds his way there. But before pushing further, Din becomes a one-man killing machine and John Wicks his way through a whole bunch of guards layer by layer in a visual reminiscent of the Phantom Menace. Once they move past the barriers, they discover a room full of tanks containing clones of Gideon, which Din just destroys. No fucking question or mention of it.
What? What the fuck?
He arrives in Gideon's chambers after this and engages him in a fight, having infuriated Gideon, who managed to perfect gene splicing and believes that he perfected the making of Force-sensitive soldiers in his image. As this goes on, Bo and the gang retreat to a luscious environment below the surface of Mandalore where life can still grow, and decide to go to war one last time for Mandalore, and Bo charges the army wielding the Darksaber.
Surprise, motherfucker!
After much fisting with one another and trying to scorch each other's fucking eyebrows off, Mando bests the Praetorian guards and both he, Grogu and Bo take on Gideon, with him destroying the Darksaber during the fight with Bo.
Why are you the way that you are?
Once Axe crashes the ship into the base, the explosion wipes out Gideon in a moment of writing genius.
Comedy.
And Grogu does a Kanan and saves Bo and Din. After the fight is done, Ragnar completes his initiation to the Creed and Din chooses to adopt Grogu, until such time at least when Grogu can speak the words of the Creed, and this lovingly happens while surrounded by all the Mandalorians of every sect that we've been able to gather so far.
Wow.
In a mass epilogue, we see that Din and Grogu approach Carson Teva over being guns for hire to aid with their remnant issue. Bo and the remaining Mandos ignite the Great Forge once again and seemingly plan to rebuild Sundari, and Navarro receives a new sheriff with the redesigned IG-11. And we close in a rather comical fashion with Din and Grogu being given a homestead on Navarro.
What fun! What fun!
There you have it, folks. That's it for another season. Was it worth the wait? For me, no and yes. If I can describe this episode in a single sentence, it would probably be, we have a new army of Imperial Mandalorian cosplayers who could kill us all. No worries, it's dealt with. Barely an inconvenience.
No, he's got a point.
This whole episode was like tipping your box of action figures out and seeing what slammed against each other. As wrap-ups go, this felt like a cursory glance at everything we've attempted to cover this season, but without any meaningful intention. We bounce between Gideon, the clones, IG, Bo and Navarro, but it lacks any of the high stakes, high rewards in its final seconds and doesn't fill me with the sense of closure I think we deserved as much as these characters did. There's a lot to break down from this finale, so let's just try and chip away at this little by little, shall we? To get my biggest gripe out of the way first from this episode, the sudden destruction of the Darksaber was frustrating as fuck. A staple of the Star Wars franchise for over 10 years, a physical embodiment of strength strength, honor, and the history that was worked into the saber and the culture of Mandalore, becoming one of the most compelling things to come from that side of the Star Wars story, was just stripped away with little concern or anger over it and relegated to a token trinket. I understand that the idea of leadership comes from the one who can unite the clans as they did with Bo in this season, and we still have the wild card with the mythosaur in the background, shown again in the closing sequence that could act as a new symbol of dominance, but to just do away with an iconic allegory like this, being representative of their culture's lineage and strength and a means to unify the creeds of Mandalore for so long, was cheap. And I've seen a few people mention that if the crystal survived it could be remade, but you lose the lore and what it represented having been the same for thousands of years. I feel that for all the years of work put into it and propping up the stories of Death Watch, Maul, Sabine and even Mando, to just have it destroyed in a throwaway action sequence that possessed the intensity of a fucking Power Rangers brawl against a former soldier of the Empire no less, deeply undermines the significance of the blade and quite frankly has pissed me off. This deserved a far greater outing in my opinion, considering the level of history that was put behind it, and it was just treated like nothing but a second-rate lightsaber. Speaking of things done dirty in this one, Gideon followed in the footsteps of Giancarlo's previous role with Gus from Breaking Bad, only the graphic nature to this moment was turned down immensely and left possibly open-ended given we never saw a body, but for a character that was presented as a second coming of Grand Admiral Thrawn with a gift of gab and influence across the galaxy, what the fuck was this? I was personally pleasantly surprised with the result of Giancarlo's jump to Star Wars given his history of villainous characters and how well he portrays them, but I did wonder if he could bring that same intensity to an Imperial role when they were treated as nothing more than genuine morons in all forms of the franchise outside of Thrawn, Vader and the Grand Inquisitor.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
For a long-standing antagonist to The Mandalorian, Gideon was a good addition to the show, and was presented as competent with his words over actions, but could still throw a good punch as seen in Season 2's finale. But to drag him from the ashes of the Empire once more, with all the mentions and concerns around his return all season, just to be written off in less than 40 minutes was fucking ridiculous. I get the thematic resolution to this, with allowing Bo and Din to strike the blows, but the way he was beaten, and the fact that the Mandalorian Beskar could withstand a full blast of flamethrower, can't endure a little heat from an explosion, is jarring to say the least, and his threat level was immediately undone due to this follow-up for me, and it failed to live up to the presence that he possessed in Chapter 23, and scuppered any possibility of him being a strong antagonist coming out at the end of this. Truly, he deserved better, and I can only hope that Thrawn gets a better fucking send-off should it come to that in the future. As for his cloning, don't worry, I'll get to that, but first we have to move on to our little green beanie bop. The functionality and practical aspects to Grogu now are brilliant, and how he's been integrated within the story almost intrinsically provides us with a sense of relief that he's not just going to be another marketing ploy, but he does provide something for the show. He was certainly highlighted here after barely anything of note to do throughout this season beyond being a fucking puppy for Lizzo and button mashing IG. It felt like a callback for the ages in a lot of ways with some of the things that they got him to do in this episode, bringing a lot of use for what he learnt from Luke, and where it felt like he was becoming background noise at this point, you can tell they were working to apply his skills to the team with Din, and that steadily means becoming an equal to him now as his adopted son. And they're demonstrating that effectively by showing him clearly learning off of Din and Bo for a spell throughout this season, by doing little movements they would, and actually responding to a lot of conversations with nods. He's no longer a plot device but a plot progressor. The reveal of the gene mining, however, from Grogu being used back in Season 1 to perfect Gideon's own army of Force-sensitive clones was a peculiar subversion, given the popular theory was that it would be used for Palp's cloning operation.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
However, that seems to be what Project Necromancer might have been hinting at last week, and honestly, the very concept and imagery of this moment was very reminiscent, at least for me, Force Unleashed 2's closing moments, where we see that Vader was working to perfect an army of Force-sensitive clones of Galen Marek. At the end of it though, however odd it might be, at least we got a definitive answer as to why Gideon wanted Grogu's blood so desperately, and it closes that chapter for both, despite how it leaves saves Gideon. That aside though, it was good fun to see him bounding around everywhere, and especially in the face of danger when up against the Praetorian guards, and to become a functioning member of the Creed and provide support that I assumed he would have done last week, though I speculated it would be under very different circumstances, which leads me to the loss of his IG suit and the sudden re-emergence of IG entirely. I was never enamoured by IG to begin with, so his destruction at the end of season 1 felt more like a progressive moment for Mando and his ability to trust droids, which, following chapter 2 by the way, just suddenly reappeared with R5 here.
Good fucking morning, Goldie.
But I guess it fills in the gap of Cara Dune suddenly being off doing her own thing, and provides a bit of a lazy answer to the question of why the fuck we even came back to him at the start of the season. And I'll be honest, I can't say that it was a celebratory moment either, and I would have preferred he remained Grogu's battlesuit. Plus, after Thor Love and Thunder, I have a bit of beef with Taika Waititi, so to have this wacky-haired wanker back doesn't convince me that the writing choices are going to get any better here. But, as we saw with Lizzo, they're going to do what they're going to do.
God fucking damn it!
As for our dear lady Bo-Katan, the resolution to her story was decent, if not a little hurried. When we settled on that shot of the clans united once more under her leadership in front of the Great Forge, it should have felt like a grander moment, but it just fell flat. I didn't feel the fanfare or cathartic payoff that I hoped her character would receive after a little over 30 years of fighting in the timeline. She's gone from prime princess to radical loyalist to devout warrior to temporary ruler and now rightful leader. Her journey is historic in this universe of storytelling, but was almost always overshadowed by Ahsoka, the clones, and even Sabine's journey in Rebels. But thankfully Dave and John felt that that time was now, and for her moment of ascension to arrive. And generally, the idea and necessary beats were conveyed throughout the season, but I just didn't get the hype. One of my followers pointed out that almost every episode concluded with Bo to imply that she is in fact the focus of the season, and that was never more evident than from the beginning when she also bathed in the living waters and the armourer took more interest in that than the fact that Mando rebirthed himself. And honestly, we shouldn't have been surprised by this given his presence in the Book of Boba Fett and how that dominated the discussions from that series, but honestly, I almost would have preferred a spin-off of her own to have dedicated time and to see a more holistic result come about for her tale, and also to allow for Mandos to be told this season and make a stronger connection between the events of chapter 19 and the final moments with Mando providing his services for the New Republic here, which could potentially aid in their discovery of Imperial informants and possibly link with the Ahsoka series and how that show will be tracking Thrawn, as this season directly mentioned as well. But again, we can see that the writing quality is top notch at Disney. Now, before we close out, I want to round off with my thoughts regarding the entire season and the titular character of Mando.
Mando!
This entire season ultimately felt muddled with an imbalance to almost everyone's running plots, bouncing between episode to episode like a kid in a candy store with various tones, themes and plots to each one. None of them ever felt like they correlated beyond Bo-Katan wants to take Mandalore back. There were decent moments, but nothing like the consistency we witnessed from season 2 that managed to balance several plates at once, with the running narratives of Gideon's intentions, Grogu's safety, Mando's mission, Bulba's return, Ahsoka's investigation, Bo's resurgence, and the Frog Lady's babies. This all in retrospect was highly underwhelming as a season, and as an episode, this was enjoyable if you like flashy colours and heavy action, but where were the stakes or consequences? During Mando's encounter with Gideon in season 2's finale, I was on the edge of my fucking seat, screaming out in excitement, and the potential for the show's direction was tantalising. How we end off here now though makes me feel like we just bid farewell to both our intrepid heroes. There was a serious lack in direction and it felt very patched together when we were closing out this episode with a rundown of presumably everyone's starting point for season 4. I got the idea that it was supposed to be a reflection of how season 2 concluded with Din saving Grogu, and now we have Grogu saving Din and how instrumental he was at many points to keeping his ass alive. But the severity and risk were never there for me, not compared to the danger we were met when Paz took on the Praetorians last week. Here, they were just treated like comedy foils for Grogu to fucking run around in like he was in the Crystal Maze. To bring Mando back to to where he started at the very beginning of the show as well, now accompanied by his son through Mandalorian custom that essentially slammed the gavel on him becoming his adoptive father, was an interesting way to leave us. Even if it was an underwhelming result, I guess it makes sense given Mando never wanted the title of ruler or the Darksaber to begin with. That was just a happy accident, and he is a bounty hunter by trade, and ultimately it was all of us that built up the idea of him becoming ruler in our heads. This is where it's a true case of fantasy booking can be a dangerous game, and essentially we all got burned by it. What I will say though is that I do like he is now repurposing his skills for a better means by supporting the New Republic and showing Grogu there's a better way to live and provide for yourself. Until such time at least when Grogu can swear to the creed, I assume. Ultimately, everything had a simple resolution here. Things happened because the script was written that way. Nothing felt natural, from Mando quickly overcoming 2 Mando commandos, and then Grogu coming to his aid, and they both dispatched the Praetorians with relative ease. Then, lest we forget the Axe having a clear path to protect the Mandos in the sky with no complications whatsoever. Then, bizarrely, no answer as to who the fucking spies were from last week after much speculation that the armor of the survivors on planet were the ones. Then to Gideon being resistant to a lot of Bo and Din's strikes, then falling to a bit of heat. Just all felt devoid of sincerity and coherency that both Season 1 and 2 equally possessed. I don't mean to be cynical with this review, but The Mandalorian has proven it can perform to a higher level and it can be refined in its execution with more consistent storytelling, better screenplays, sturdier foundations, and balance more than one plot without feeling disjointed or directionless, and I want it to return to that state entering Season 4. But so that you don't think I'm just a little grumpy guts, the visuals for this episode were decent, and Bo's charge into battle felt like a wholesome moment that invokes that moment of her igniting the blade over the heads of the clans when Sabine passed it to her in Rebels, and honestly, the spectacle alone of the fight was a genuine joy to watch. Grogu was suitably entertaining, and how we've left things feels like how Book of Boba Fett finished, but let's just pray they can bring things back to form next season. But as far as my positives can go, that is really the only things that I can lean on. That's all I've got for now though. I greatly appreciate you stopping by for this. I hope you'll stick around for the future and more videos I have on the way, as I've got plenty more I wish to discuss and review. So subscribe, leave a like, and until next time everyone, take care, and may the Force be with you.